this happens in lots of different ways. We had a great showcase this morning about how literacy is supported. But there's also lots of other ways that we're supporting. And one of the ways that we support both our Indigenous learners as well as our non-Indigenous learners, because all learners need to be aware, is through the work of our Indigenous Learning Branch. And Cindy Stefanato has joined us here today, who's going to share a little bit of an update. And I'll pass the ball over to you, Cindy. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Good morning, everyone. This morning, we'll have the opportunity to read the report. Really, we just want to show you some highlights and some of the things that we've been doing, and of course, give you the opportunity to ask any questions. I kind of chuckle because I
It's just flipping, so I'm just going to see if I've got any magic in me this morning.
do like that magic E.
Yes.
And literacy. How's it? Is that better?
If it flashes, then that's flashing there a little bit. We'll see.
Okay. Thank you for showing me what flipping a mic is. I was not certain, and then I hear Lori behind me telling me.
It's okay. It just has to hit the right spot on the ceiling that's going to pick up the signal. It's sometimes a tricky spot.
And don't put the plug in too close to it.
Ooh. Okay, don't breathe, but you can talk.
Okay.
Thanks.
Oh, I'm going to keep talking. I'll try to notice. So what I was going to say is just we don't have the opportunity to talk very often. I'm very lucky that I get to see a few people like Melissa and Fred at our.
Just to be totally distraction for you. Okay, let's try this again.
Is that better? Okay. See you too. What I was going to say is just so just last week we had one of our Indigenous advisory circle get-togethers, and for example, what we do in those meetings is any administrative procedure that we put together, we always put together with consultation with the advisory circle. So last week we were looking at a new procedure for smudging in schools, smudging in pipe ceremonies, as well as raising teepees in schools. So as you're aware, in those meetings we have representation from all of the nations for Treaty 7. So we have Stoney representation, Tsuut'ina representation, Blackfoot representation, and Métis representation. So we feel very fortunate to be able to have those meetings where we can present what our work is as we go along in the process. So we don't start the work without consultation. It's involved every step of the way. So just getting into some of the things that I would like to share with you today. When I look at the statistics that we have, or the data that we have for the requests for support, it's pretty close to where it was last year when we look at each category and the percentage of requests we get for each category. However, the number has risen considerably. So last year, we were looking at 131 requests for support, formal requests. So that doesn't include, when a school reaches out and says, I'm wondering about this resource, do you know anything about it, or that sort of thing. It's more when schools really are looking for in-depth work. So the numbers percentage-wise have gone up to 202 this year so far within the year. So that's between February of 2024 and February of 2025. When we look at it, the areas that we're looking at are requests for cultural support in areas such as connecting with elders, event planning, and protocol adherence. So that number went up by 12%. The number of requests or the percentage of requests for curricular and resource support in areas such as indigenizing practices, connection to resources and modeling lessons, stayed static, so that was 37%. And then the percentage of requests for administrative support in areas such as school-wide planning, professional learning, and connection to student support resources went down by 12%, which is actually a little bit smaller than the percentage sounds in the 6 schools. So when we look at what might explain the difference in those numbers, even though it's not really great, is that we have increased the amount of support that we have and relationships that we have with elders and knowledge keepers and community members in each of those areas. So in each of the nations who feeds into Treaty 7, we really rely on community members to really support us in making sure that we're supporting schools appropriately, and that we're not pan-indigenizing our support for schools, and that we're not speaking with an outside voice. So for example, my treaty area is Robinson Superior, which is Eastern Woodlands, so Ontario. So I will always be a guest in Treaty 7 territory. So my job is to facilitate really our schools having access to all the elders, knowledge keepers, and community members within our territory, or the territory that we're in. When I look at the change in administrative support requests, I feel as though our administrators are building their capacity, and in that they're building the capacity in their staff, so they're more comfortable reaching out and looking at things like inviting guests in. So in order to support that, we've created quite a few visual resources, because what we want to do is, instead of creating a dependency, always guided by the community members within Treaty 7, we also want to build capacity and comfort and confidence in our staff. So what we want to do is to be able to build some independence there, so that they can rely on resources that have been put together, again, in consultation with the community, so that they can, here's one example. So this example is choosing appropriate Indigenous resources. So it's a quick visual. It guides, let's say, a teacher who's trying to determine whether it's an appropriate resource. It asks questions such as who developed the resource, and there are some points underneath it. Were permissions provided? There are points underneath it. How are Indigenous people portrayed? Is the diversity of Indigenous people shown? Images and imagery and vocabulary. So that's one example. We also have a checklist resource for when you are hosting an Indigenous guest in your building. So it walks you through things like making sure that they have snacks and appropriate seating, making sure that you're not scheduling them too much, making sure that you have tobacco ready for cultures where it's appropriate to offer tobacco, that sort of thing. So that's one of the things that we feel is helping the numbers increase for us, inviting guests into our schools. When I look at some of the things that we're working on that we're pretty proud of, I have been blessed with an incredible team. The team, as you may be aware, is very diverse. So we have people from different places and different nations who all support the work that we're doing. We have increased our ASBA Honorary Spirit Awards nominations from 2 to 6 this year. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but for me, that's a 200% increase. So I'm happy about that. We have some remarkable students, and we have some remarkable team members and staff who are really supporting those students to soar, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. We are working within the community, for example, in our work with our education service agreement with Satina. Part of our work is to be reciprocal in our support for each other. So we host every year a ribbon skirt making activity or group of sessions. And so last night was our first one for this year. So this year we've increased it to making ribbon shirts as well as ribbon skirts. And what we do is we invite families in. The principal of the school phones the family of each student individually, so they get a personalized invitation so that it doesn't get lost in emails and that sort of thing. And we help families, so we provide the teachings, we bring people in to support the teachings, and we provide teachings for ribbon skirts and ribbon shirts. We help family members to make a ribbon skirt or ribbon shirt for everybody in the family, so it's not solely the student. Really, we're looking at community. So this was at Bandon Peak School. It's at the school this morning for a PLC meeting at 7:30 this morning. So we kind of chuckled about how we were there late last night, the principal and I, and then we were there early again this morning. But in the conversation, she referred to supporting the community from Satina in particular, because the school's on Satina land, and that's the ESA that we're looking at, but also the community of every other Indigenous student or self-identified First Nations, Métis or Inuit student who attends the school. She calls it trying to build a community within the community. So I just thought that was sweet, and maybe feel like those students are cared for and feel at home. As I said, the number of relationships that Rocky View Schools is building with First Nations, Métis, Inuit elders, knowledge keepers, and community members is increasing steadily. So with the numbers of visits that we have, so is our access to information and knowledge as people share. They're generous. A lot of the people we work with are incredibly generous in sharing their knowledge, and we're very fortunate for that. We, again, the Indigenous Learning Self-Reflection Tool has been incredibly helpful in helping teachers to see areas where they could improve, but also see areas that they're doing well and that they might not know. So our next step with that this year will be at the end of the year, administering the tool again so that people can see how much they've grown. So I think that's an incredible piece for us. We are also looking at mentoring staff who are working in specific areas of Indigenous learning. So staff who have taught what's still called Aboriginal Studies, but we call it Indigenous Studies. This year have had full sessions with our team, and we've invited guests in so that they have a really genuine understanding of what they're teaching and why they're teaching it, so that when they go back to their schools, they're not sort of reading out of a book, instead it's real and living for them. We facilitate a lot of guests coming into those classes so that we are making sure that we're connecting with the community. We also have 2 schools who are offering Indigenous student-specific support in learning support. So we have a learning support teacher who has 1 period at Croxford and 1 at George McDougall. And what happens is those our First Nations, Métis, and Inuit students have access to learning support all of the time that they ordinarily would, and this chunk of time is designated specifically for First Nations, Métis, or Inuit students, so that what we're doing is not substituting support for them, we're supplementing it, so we're giving them additional support. We're really looking forward to seeing how well that works, what we might need to tweak next year, and if we can increase it in our high schools. We really want to triage those students who might need extra support to make sure that we're increasing the chance to the best that we can that they'll graduate on. We're also shifting from solely supporting protocol and foundational knowledge members to that knowledge. We feel like now that the branch has been active for a couple of years, we are really starting to get our feet on the ground in helping specific students. So really looking at that student-specific support. We always have, of course, supported specific students and specific needs, but we really felt like where we needed to start was building that foundational knowledge so that teachers would understand the background before they started making decisions about what students needed without, let's say, reaching out to their families, understanding concepts like nothing about us without us, and that sort of thing. So we really feel like we're starting to build momentum, and we're really excited about it. We're really excited about what the future holds for us. We do have 2 positions which are unfilled at the moment. One of the challenges of the branch is being able to find candidates who both have knowledge of education and are learning specialists, but also have the background information that would be required to support learning from an Indigenous perspective. So that walking in both worlds has been a little bit tricky for us because, as you can imagine, the more criteria we layer on, then it just creates a scarcity in the available candidates. However, we're actively committed to it, and we believe that in the future we will be as lucky as we have been